So in order to switch to Vue, I will mark all that code and comment it out, which you can do by selecting this all and then going to edit and then toggle line or block comment. I used line comment here. So now this code will not have any effect anymore. I'm not deleting it so that we can still see it and compare it, because now I want to use Vue. For that, we first of all need to add Vue. We need to import Vue. We can do this from Vue.js.org. There, we can click on Get Started and then on Installation. Here you find different ways of adding Vue to a project, and we will explore different ways throughout this course. But for this basic project, for this basic demo here, we can click on CDN and grab this CDN link which you see here. Side note, the exact link you see when you visit this page might differ, but you will find some script tag with a link that will import Vue. So let's grab that, go to index.html and add that before your script here. So before we execute app.js. Add this script with the Vue CDN above your own script. That will your script allow to use Vue. So now, let's save this file. In app.js, we can use Vue. And now what does use Vue mean? With Vue, we can solve the same problem, if you want to call it like this, in a totally different way. In regular JavaScript, which we used before, we use a so-called imperative approach, which means we define every single step by step, which should be executed by the browser. Get access to the button, get access to the input element, get access to the list element, create a function, add a click event handler to the button, and execute this function if a click occurs. And in that function, get access to the entered value, create a list item element, add the text content, append this list item, clear the value. You see a pattern? We define every single step. With Vue, we have a totally different approach. There, we define the desired end result and the data we will need in our Vue app, and we will leave it up to Vue to figure out what needs to be created or added or changed in the DOM at which point of time. And for that, we need to create a Vue app, which takes control over our HTML code. And we do this by calling Vue, which is a global object that is available thanks to our Vue CDN import, Vue.createApp. So on this global Vue object, we can call createApp. CreateApp takes an object, a JavaScript object, where we configure this Vue app. And when I say configure, I mean things like setting up which kind of data we will use in our Vue app. For example, in this demo, I plan on working with a list of goals, so one piece of data which we'll need is that list of goals. Another piece of data which we'll need is what the user entered here. And we define that data by adding a data property to this object we pass to createApp. And this has to be called data. It actually holds a function as a value, and therefore in modern JavaScript, we can also write it like this, which is the exact same. A property named data, which has a function as a value. This function must return an object, and in this object, we can then define the data our Vue app should be aware of. As a side note, if this is a bit too fast for you, no worries. We'll walk through all the basics in greater depth in the next module. This here is just a quick overview, which is why I'm not diving super deep into all these concepts at the moment. We'll definitely do that in the next section though. So we need to return an object here, and in here we can simply add the data we want to manage in this app. This would be a goals array, which initially is empty, as a key value pair, and the entered value, which initially is an empty string. And now these two pieces of data are pieces of data Vue is aware of, and that will become important later. Now we can connect this entered value with this input by adding a special so-called directive on the input, a special HTML attribute. And that would be the v-model attribute. That's not a default attribute which is supported by HTML. This will only be understood by Vue. And as a value, we repeat the name of this property, entered value. This will establish a connection between this input and the value being entered there and this data property. And Vue will manage this for us. It will automatically listen to what the user enters, and it will automatically update this input whenever we change entered value in code, for example. And that's of course way more convenient than manually reaching out to the input and managing all of that. But this is just the first step. Now upon a button, we want to make sure that we get what's currently stored in entered value and add this to goals. For this, we can add another key value pair to this object we're passing to create app, and that's the methods key, which now holds an object. In here, we can define methods, functions that should be callable from inside the HTML code. So for example, here we can add an add goal method, and in there, then reach out to goals and add the currently entered value. We can do this with this goals and then push, since goals is an array, this entered value. In case you're wondering why this refers to this object, Vue will establish the connection behind the scenes. It does some magic for us here, though throughout the course we are going to explore and also understand that magic. Now add goal should be triggered whenever this button is clicked. And instead of manually reaching out to the button element and adding a click listener as we did it before with just JavaScript, with Vue we can simply add another special attribute to the button element, the v-on attribute. Then we add a colon and then the name of the event to which we want to listen, in this case click. And then as a value, we specify the name of the method that should be triggered when the item on which we added this special attribute is clicked. So in our case, add goal, just like this. With that, Vue will make sure that add goal, this method, gets executed whenever this button is clicked. And it will then automatically give us the currently entered value and add it as a new value to goals. And now there's only one thing that remains. We wanna output our goals here in this unordered list. And for that, we wanna create list items here, one for every goal. And with Vue, as I mentioned, we define the desired end result, not how we get there. So again, we wanna have a list item at the end. That's our desired result, but of course not just one. And Vue get the v-for attribute, which we can add on an element to replicate this element multiple times. And here, between the double quotes, we then need to write goal in goals to in the end loop through all our goals here and create one list item per goal. And we get access to that goal, for which we're currently creating one, in this goal variable. Now we can output this goal with another special syntax understood by Vue. And that's double curly braces, opening and closing, and between them, goal. So this name here. And that will now replicate list item as often as needed and then output one goal per goal entry we have in this goals array. And if we now saved it all and reload, you'll see absolutely nothing. Instead, you just see that curly brace thing which I just entered. The reason for that is that this Vue code will be correct, but Vue doesn't know where that code should have an effect, where it should be applied. That's why on this created app, here, after the closing parentheses, we need to call mount and let Vue know which part of the page should be controlled by that Vue app. And conveniently, I got a div here with the ID app, which contains all the markup that uses the Vue features I explained over the last minutes, where I use all the special attributes, for example. This div with the ID app contains all that code. So it's this div that should be controlled by this Vue app. And therefore, to mount, we pass a string with a CSS selector selecting one element in the DOM. And since we have the ID app on that div here, we can use the ID selector for the ID app like this, with hash and then app. And if we save this now and reload again, now this looks differently. And if I finish the course, that's added. If I learn Vue, that's being added. And if I want to reset the input, I can simply set this entered value to an empty string. And Vue will automatically reach out to the DOM and make the required updates. So again, learn Vue, and it's clear. Finish the course, and it's cleared. And now this is Vue taking over.